Yes, recording is, as the voice says, there is a recording in progress. And despite the fact that it's a beautiful day out there, Pat and I are indoors. Pat, the things we do for our public.
Our loyal viewers. Yeah. Beautiful day, Jude.
Oh,
Absolutely. Donegal, you could be on the coast of Spain, southern Spain today. It's beautiful.
man,
Absolutely beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
I was out for a walk, and there's people, as I said, there's people talking to me that wouldn't look near me when the sun isn't shining. Okay, let's. I asked last time we were out doing a piece that maybe some of the viewers would want to give us some topics for discussion. And a few people have responded. So I'd like to just very quickly, we'll spend maybe 5-10 minutes at that. There's a man called Antin. I've forgotten, he may have given another name as well. But he talks about, he says he'd like us to talk about suicide, the prevalence of suicide. And he links the sort of upsurge in suicides to the growing inequality in wealth and in housing allocation and poverty and deprivation. Would you go along with that, Pat?
I'd say it's a factor, Jude. You know, there's so many things now. Suicide's a broad church. There's no doubt about that, and it's a tragedy for everybody. You know, I always think families never recover from suicide, Jude. There are many other forms of death that you can sort of deal with. But I think suicide, you spend the rest of your life sort of going, "What? Why didn't I do something? Why didn't I see something? Why didn't I cop onto something?" And you spend the rest of your life asking questions. But on equality, Jude, there's no doubt about it. If you are living, a handy mouth, under stress, anxious, suffering from anxiety all the time, Jude, I would say that. And Jude, there's no doubt about it. Quite recently, I read. A very rich guy in America, says it's only a matter of time before they start coming for us with the pitchforks, because he says the inequality is now so great that and Jude, some parts of the world are going more right wing because they feel they have been left behind, and others are saying the very people they're voting for are the very people who have left them behind. So I don't know, Jude, it's a very confused world.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pat, to say that it's a mixture of things that would lead to suicide. Incidentally, have you known any people who've taken their own lives?
No, I wouldn't go so far, but I've known of people like within, I was going to say my family circle, that wouldn't be true, but in my sort of friend circle, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's just, and I've heard it so often. He or she was smiling the day before and was in great form and all
Mm-hmm.
the rest of it, and the next thing
Mm-hmm.
you hear, and it just comes as
Mm-hmm.
so, Jude, what has somebody said? A lot of people are like swans. On the surface, everything great, but underneath they're churning away. And Jude, I think suicide. Someone. I don't mean, I'm not being in the least bit facetious. If any in my circle committed suicide, I think it would kill me. I couldn't deal with it. I really genuinely could.
Yeah, very hard because, as you say, you feel this terrible feeling of guilt. I know one person
Yeah.
in the last few months that had took their own life, and I must say I found it very upsetting. Um, as you say, why did I not spot that? Why did I not see signs? And if I did see signs, what could I have done? I think you find it hard to get into the head of the person that would have taken their lives.
Absolutely.
Um,
Uh,
I was talking to my daughter about this, and she was saying that there are people who take their lives. They don't see themselves as a positive factor in anybody's life. In other words,
yeah.
the other people's lives would be better if they were off the scene, and that's very often a
Uh,
part of the motivation. It's a shocking thing, and you're right too. Of course, inequality. I mean, if you're wealthy, if you have a house, if you've got a job, and so on, that satisfy you, you're more likely to have more things to live for. So while I wouldn't
Absolutely.
say it's exclusively a question of inequality of wealth or housing or anything else,
But it's a
it could
factor.
play a factor, could well play a factor. Although, again, in the end, and I think about suicides I've known over my life, they tend to be somewhere in there as personal
Uh,
relationships, very often intense
Absolutely.
relationships. Young men in particular are
A young man in particular.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, as a cheerful note to start on, let's go to another one now. This one is from somebody called G1 1607. Was something happened in 1607?
1607, isn't that the flight of the Airlines?
It wasn't 1690, maybe. Anyway, this person's
No,
talking
that
about,
was
he wants us to talk about briefly now about the idea of that unionists are pushing for a super-majority and how nationalism should respond to that. Would you sum up your own views on that, Pat, and I'll tell you mine?
I think that but by the way, I read, I think it was over the weekend, that Ian Og Paisley is to table a motion to the House of Commons that there should be a supermajority in the event of a poll in United Ireland. And what was the other one? There's someone else along this line. Apparently the DUP. One of the things they're discussing with the British government, they want assurances that there'll be no border poll on the agenda or on the table if they go back into Stormont.
Oh.
You know, so Jude, like this always gets me because I'm saying the north of Ireland was formed. The foundation of it was there was no consultation with the nationalist people. They weren't even consulted in any shape or form. Northern Ireland was set up, etc., etc., etc. And they were told, this is a democracy, by the way, which it never was. Not when someone's artificial, it's not naturally democratic. So when you set up a sectarian head count, don't tell anybody that's a natural democracy. But anyway, let's ignore all that. Anyway, for years, I have heard, and so have you, so many unions coming on our TV screens, on our radios, and saying the majority decides, and you just get used to it. Well, no, it's the other way around. I think what's caught Jude the many to wrap it up is the change has been so rapid. A lot of people have underestimated the change, and I was reading, where was the last day? I know that council ABC, that Ards, Ballycastle, not Ballycastle, Ballyclare and Coleraine or someone along there somewhere. The change there in the space of about 10 years is unbelievable. But anyway, Jude, the unionist vote in 2017 was about 49.1%. It's now, I think, down to 39.3%. In 10 years, it's about
in 6 or 7 years, a 10% drop, actually.
About 10% drop. But here's the bottom line of it, Jude. If democracy, and there's one simple point: if 50% plus one is enough to maintain the union, 50 plus one is enough for United Ireland, and that's democracy. And by the way, the Turkish elections were on the last day, and the guy, I think Erdogan said if he got 50 plus one, he won the election, and that's democracy, Jude.
That's right. Somebody was saying also that that they might. Well, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think the idea of, I think perhaps those who are suggesting it, they detect a chink where in nationalist and Republican thinking, where they're saying we really would want to bring as many unionists with us as possible, who would assent to it. But that's a different thing from saying whether or not you have a valid election or a valid majority. And I'd agree with you completely. We should do everything possible to make sure that the vision of a new Ireland is something that people want to live in, regardless of their political affiliations. But we certainly shouldn't then say, oh, well, they'll have a veto on whether or not we can have it. The other thing somebody mentioned was the idea of repartition. I think it was the same man, same person, GJ1607, said the idea of repartition, that you might have unionists saying, well, let's have repartition, then that would solve it. What do you think of that? Sorry, Pat. I can't help laughing.
I think that's a joke. Jude, there was a well-known unionist journalist I knew in Derry years ago. A nice fellow, by the way, and a very good fellow as well. But I remember one day he came into me and he said, hey, Pat, the Derry Journal should be espousing the fact that there's a Protestant or unionist majority in the East Bank of Londonderry. It should be a separate council. And I said to him, hey, when there was a massive majority on the West Bank, you guys weren't going to give them. So, no. That's I sometimes wonder at unionism. They say, and it's a generalization, but a lot of them generally do seem to think that democracy only works when it's running their way. And I find that unbelievable.
You said that there was a massive majority, a unionist majority. In fact, on the city side, there wasn't a unionist majority. That was the whole thing. It was a unionist minority.
He was talking about the East Bank. But he meant the East Bank of the city, where there was a small unionist majority. So he thought there should be two councils, one for the East Bank and one for the West Bank. And I was going, here we go again. So you'll be in the majority there again.
Yeah. I,
Well,
I, I
well,
said,
he was just, yeah, he wasn't stupid, or and he wasn't. No, I thought, good God, are you for real? Do you think that Jerry Jordan's going to come out and support that? Take another one.
God loves a
Yeah,
trier, Pat. God loves a trier.
yeah.
Okay, one last thing from one of our viewers, Mr. Rugen Maths, it's called, and he asks essentially the question: what is the point in the SDLP? In other words, is it a good thing that the SDLP exists? Is it presenting any sort of perspective on politics that isn't already catered to? What do you think?
Well, you know, a long time ago, to use that term, eventually it got to say, do you want the shadow or do you want the substance? And I think a lot of the British ministers came to the conclusion, we can talk all day to the unionists and we can talk all day to the SDLP, but the people we really need to be talking to is Sinn Féin and the DUP, because they're the people who are getting the votes, and they're the people who are causing, they were saying no, 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 no. They were the people who had to be persuaded. What is somebody said, you could persuade the SDLP of anything and the DUP of nothing. And so that's very cynical, but that's the way. No, I do think the SDLP have a role. I genuinely do. There are
What?
a lot of very good people in the
They
SDLP.
are good people, but
They,
what's their role, Pat? What do they do? What do they
hey,
do
Jude,
that?
there's a lot of moderate people. Hey, Jude, there's some people I know, and the hell can freeze over before they'll vote Sinn Féin.
Yeah,
So
but that's
those
not.
nationalists, they might well go to either alliance or even, God forbid, if hold their hands up, the EUP. So even from a point of view of uh, what solidifying the nationalist position, I think the SDLP has a role, even if nothing else. But when you look at Colin Eastwood, what do you call her? Not Katie, what do you call the girl from Belfast? The MP, Claire Hannon. She
Yeah.
is very, very good. And as well, I think they're very good at articulating a nationalist position that doesn't frighten the horses.
Yeah, I think a point. I think what I'd worry about is, I mean, their numbers are going down so much every election
Yeah,
that it does seem kind of inevitable that they will vanish or come near to
yeah, they will.
vanishing. But I think you're also right in saying that there are people who would vote for them who would not vote for others. And as you say, Colm Eastwood and Claire Hanna, for example, are both articulate
Yeah,
and sort of, not, I wouldn't say charismatic, but they are attractive sort of politicians.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah. Although I suppose, as you say, again, it does feel like shadow and substance. I mean, the core
yeah.
of nationalism now is firmly in the hands
It's
of
now
Sinn
shifted
Féin.
totally to Sinn Féin. Yeah,
But I
definitely.
think, yeah, as you say, SDLP may have a contribution to make. All right, that sounds very
Yeah, yeah.
condescending, but I don't mean it that way. Okay, let's go on to some of the things that are in the papers. Una Mullally makes a point that you were just making, actually, with regard to suicide. She says that the tents appeared, many tents that are on the street now in
Yeah,
Dublin, they only appeared whenever your state became really, really rich,
yeah,
which is a terrible irony. You have this
yeah.
16 or whatever it is, 60 billion surplus, and you have more
Mm.
people now sleeping in tents on the street. How is that possible?
Let's get this clear. Right now, we haven't got the 65 billion until 2026, but
Okay,
that's projections. Yeah. But anyway, let's move on. Like the policies of various governments. Fine Gael have been in government for 12 years, Jude, so they can't point the finger at Sinn Féin or anybody else. And that's one thing that gets up everybody's noses when Leo Varadkar and people like that start pointing the finger at Sinn Féin about housing. It's got nothing to do with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are actually, Ona Brum seems to have far better handle on it than anybody in Fine Gael. But let's move on, or Fianna Fáil. But here, let's move on a bit. When I was growing up, Jude, county councils provided what they call public housing or local government housing, or whatever they like to call it. I don't even know what. Anyway, they used to build housing estates for working families. I grew up in one, council houses, and they were fine houses. They were fine estates and fine people. And then about something, the whole ideology changed. Leave it to the private market. Leave it to the privateers, the developers, and all the rest of it. And suddenly, the public ownership of housing disappeared totally. And that caused massive, because if you look around Dublin, They didn't build a single house for any working family. All of a sudden, there were these huge, big apartment blocks being built for the middle classes and the computer classes, the high tech guys and the lawyers and the accountants and all the rest of it. And Jude, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Jude, at the minute, if I remember correctly, reading somewhere this last week, there are now 12,000 people homeless in Ireland, and it's getting worse. Now, okay, I presume the government can point to there are 100,000 people have come, refugees and asylum seekers have come here in about this last 2 years. And before that, there was an influx of Poles and Eastern Europeans, and all the rest of it. And I understand that there's a big demand, and and the housing market's getting squeezed big time. But Jude, it all comes down to policy and bad planning. And okay, I accept that the government are trying their best in recent years to solve the problem and all that. But Jude, someone if you don't put on the foundation, it's very hard to build a house halfway up.
In some ways, the situation in the south, and I guess in the north to some extent too, is a reflection of what is the case on a global level. If you think about it, on a global level, you have America, you have Britain, and I suppose you have countries like France and Italy and so on, and they have TV programs about tickling people's palate. Oh, you'd really love this dish.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Yeah.
there's half or at least a third of the world is starving to death. There's something crazy there. And yet people don't seem to feel any moral imperative to get out there and do something about that. Have you gone to the United Nations now? What's the whole fuss? Oh, will we send more armaments to Ukraine to kill more people?
Yeah.
No, there's an argument for that, but my God, there's something obscene when you say billions, no problem. Send them and make these armaments, blow people up. And we say there's people dying of hunger and deprivation. And we're letting them die.
Dude, wasn't there one of those cruise missile type? Didn't they cost someone like the bunk busters? Did they cost $1 million or something each?
That's right.
They were used particularly in Iraq and so on. When you think back on it, like one of those things costs more than what most people or a community might make in those countries in a lifetime.
Are the parties that we have here really aware of that? To tell you the truth, I'm thinking of people before profit. People before profit would be the one party I think that is really focused on that notion that people should be what makes the world go round rather than global capitalism or local capitalism. No other party does that, and yet they get very few votes. Is that because they're not that good, or is it because we're selfish, or what is it?
No, I've talked to people and they said, "Oh, it's very laudable, people before profit and so on." But you need to be making profit. You need to be, the economy needs to be, if everybody goes to the left and so on, and everybody looking after everybody, just watch how quick the economy will go down. Almost greed is good. And I've heard it so often that us giving like the Irish government, remember the 13 billion that it was at Microsoft or something, and they don't want to take it because it might affect their relationship with big corporations. Like, Jude, you go, Jesus Christ, Now this is a time, Jude, by the way, they were imposing charges. They were trying to bring in water charges. There was the universal social tax that was introduced. They were people going to school were suddenly getting bigger bills and so on. But at the same time, the Irish government, because of their, the absolutely whip hand the corporation, they didn't want to disturb them.
A vested interest, I guess. I don't know. I really don't know where you'd start with something like that. Would you give people more money in their pocket for nothing? Or would you try to set up businesses and sort of supplement them with public money? Or, I mean, what?
Jude, it all started, the rot started big time with Ronnie Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. The so-called trickle-down economics, I can't remember the name of the guy, Friedman or something, whatever his name was.
Milton Friedman.
And so on. Yeah, Milton Friedman. He said that money, if you create money, it trickles down. No, it didn't. Basically, what happened was where years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the managing director earned about, at most, maybe 5 times, 10 times the factory floor worker. Now there are places in America where the managing director earns up to 500 times what the average worker earns. In fact, there are quite a few cases where it's considerably more. The tax situation in America in the way back, and the Brits followed it. The super rich paid about 90% tax above a certain threshold. Now it's down to something like 35%. And and a lot of the business as well, like corporations now are not national; they are global. And if you're getting taxed one place, they just go somewhere else. So there's no control, and the world has become a very, very unfair place. The work, and of course, Reagan and Thatcher came up with all sorts of wheezes to limit the power of unions. The unions were getting in the way of development and all of it. What they meant was they were getting in the way of the greedy bastards at the top and so on, who wanted to squeeze workers and make big profits for themselves. Dude, I was a manager. I was a managing editor of the Daily Journal, and I saw firsthand a lot of the big guys in the business were more concerned with making profits and keeping the stockholders or the shareholders happy than keeping the staff happy or anything else. Their main concern by a mile was ensuring that the profit level stayed high.
Yeah, one of the things as somebody who's involved in education, one of the things I really resent is the way that notion of the kind of the industrialization, as it were, of everything has happened. That is to say, the tentacles of the industrial world have found their way into schools. You go into schools now and you see a framed statement, investor in people. We got this award from business telling us we're really investing in people very well. You talk to somebody about education, they'll say, oh, well, just get more people to do this for their jobs. So the whole idea that education might be about anything else other than getting people who can get jobs that'll make plenty of money is out. Now, I don't for a moment believe that you don't look after yourself and try to provide for yourself and your family. But that notion that everything in the world comes down to pounds, shillings, and pence, and in practice, it comes down to pounds, shillings, and pence for a small section, while the lumpen mass can, they can sleep in a tent, and if they're lucky, will not burn them out.
Worse. Yeah, but there's an even worse. Thatcher and the whole Tory way back when they come to power, they stopped referring to people in hospitals as patients, but as clients.
Clients.
You know.
Where do you go there? Okay, let's go on to the next item, which was by this guy, Pat Leahy. And he was talking about Sinn Féin not needing to really do much because they had the DUP doing the hard work for them because they were making them look good all the time. And he said also the coalition were doing the same thing so that Sinn Féin were able to sing dumb on the question of a border poll as well. They were keeping quiet on that because they wanted to draw in those people, the middle class. Now, I'm just wondering, do you think that that's true, that second part? Now, first of all, they Sinn Féin are very lucky in their opponents because their opponents keep making mistakes. But secondly, do you think that Sinn Féin is deliberately avoiding a border poll because they want to pull in the middle section who might get frightened or the horses might get frightened?
There probably is an element of truth in that. Like, haven't they dropped the thing about PESCO, and they've also dropped the thing about NATO, right? They've got rid of that. What else? There's someone else they got rid of quite recently as well. I remember they used to be very anti-EU, and they've gone very much middle of the road.
And that was quite to be fair to them, Pat, that was quite a while ago that they were anti-EU.
Except that, that was a long time ago. In fact, I used to be very anti-EU myself, and I've changed my mind. It's got nothing to do with Sinn Féin. Particularly during the recession, I was seriously anti-EU because I thought their behaviour was atrocious. But anyway, I've come to the conclusion maybe better in than out after Brexit.
Exactly.
But anyway, getting back to that, Jude, I think Leahy, it's not often I agree with columnists in the Irish Times because usually they've got one agenda and one agenda only. But I do agree. Remember our friend who did a broadcast with Gabriel McCafferty from Canada?
Yes.
Gabriel actually sent me a thing complaining about the fact that I is along the lines that sort of saying Sinn Féin didn't have to do much. Well, I'm still sticking to the line. Mary Lou McDonald, or not Mary Lou, Michelle O'Neill during the local government election, went around like a president. It was very presidential. She didn't get involved in the party poll. She didn't. She said, "We're the party of sensible people. We want to get back into Stormont. We want to address the health
Yeah,
crisis. We want to address
and
the
she said,
deficit. We want to get
she
the
would be first,
social. What's that, Jude?
and she
Sorry,
said she'd be first minister for everybody. She kept emphasizing.
everyone. Yeah, very presidential and very middle of the road. And to use your term, she wasn't there to frighten horses. And Jude, it was time after time. It was the DUP in particular, but closely allied and followed by Jamie Bryson and Jim Allister. And I think every nationalist just said bollocks to this. We're not taking this crap anymore, and we've had enough of this. That this crap that unionists has to give everything. Jude, nationalists live in Northern Ireland, get under British rule. They live under a monarchy where the civil service is still very unionist dominated and orientated. The police are, and you keep hearing this thing that unionists have to give all the time and nationalists are taking all the time. This is a place where the nationalists are now a bigger community.
Yeah, but you see,
Jesus, you sort of go, wait a minute, where are you people at? Sorry.
Yeah, I think if the problem was that unionism had control for so long, and when you try to write the balance, it looks like they're having, everything's been taken from them, and it's hard. It's hard to get used to equality, but you just have to if that's it. Here's a question for you, Pat. Do you think it's to the advantage or the disadvantage of Sinn Féin that the Northern Ireland states should be functioning and prospering?
I think in a way it should. And I didn't think that until quite recently, but it possibly is. I don't think it's a big loss if it's not, because the very people who need Northern Ireland to function most of all are the unionism, not nationalism. But here, there's one point. If if the union was back, Stormont was back up and running, and you had Sinn Féin ministers and pole positions, right? No, First Minister set as settled.
Yeah.
Sinn Féin government in the north and Sinn Féin government in the south, and Sinn Féin ministers talking to each other across the border. Jude, that would be one hell of a platform to push any sort of nationalist agenda, wouldn't it?
I agree with that, but I still come back to this question of whether or not a flourishing Northern Ireland would be good or bad. For example, the last time I heard anybody any unionist objecting to the idea of United Ireland, they were saying, sure, they couldn't take us on. Well, where would we get the 12 billion a year? They wouldn't be able to give us that. They just can't afford us. We'd be too much of a financial burden for them. So that's the argument, if you like, for having a Northern Ireland that isn't really working all that well. The other side of it is, if it's working really well, if Northern Ireland is prospering, then why would you want to change it? I think a lot of nationalists, small n nationalists, if it was working really well, would be ensconced in positions of authority and power and wealth and wouldn't want to change it. So it's a complicated.
Yeah, but Richard, here's the other side of the story to that. Remember the German, the guy Hubner, as far as his name was, he did all the economics and the projections for the unification of Germany East and West, and he worked out that there would be initial problems, and Irish unification. But he worked out with them a very short time, something like 5-10 years, if everything went to a reasonable degree, that it would be a plus situation. Now, Paul Gosling, a former colleague of mine, involved in we were involved in the project sometime. Paul did a lot of work on this as well. And you'd see this thing about the block grant and the handed over. There was all sorts of things ruled into that or not. There's all things about pensions for British Army guys. There are also things about defence and about so on. And when Paul tried to sort of, and Paul's pretty good at all that sort of, I think when he sort of deconstructed a lot of the block grant, a lot of it we weren't responsible for at all. A lot of this stuff is British stuff, and it's what's that? There's all sorts of things about keeping up the royal family and all that sort of stuff. I can't remember it, but anyway, it wasn't any near the figure wasn't any near as bad. Right. The other side of the story, to get refer back now to the other thing. If by 2026 we have 65 billion ensconced some bank or some wherever, I presume if the block grant is only 15 billion a year, and that even is not an accurate figure, that might be something like 5-7 million. I presume we could afford it. A billion, by the way, not million.
It's very hard to know. I suspect here's at the end, I'd probably opt for this. I mean, I wouldn't want to see anybody in the north or the south suffering deprivation or a bad economy. But I think if the north had a thriving economy and the south had a thriving economy, I think actually that would probably be the best situation for bringing the two
Absolutely.
together, rather than saying one of them is a limp partner and we'll pull them in and kind of support them.
Yeah.
That to me would be ideal. And the truth is this, really, that's the way it should be. It's been set on like the South is thriving. It's been set on a plate for the North with this single market access.
Yeah.
And yet the DUP is standing in the doorway stopping it. So, I mean, they must have thought this through as well. So maybe they're afraid of a North that actually is economically sound. Wouldn't that be ironic?
Well, exactly. You're going back to George Osborne, the former Tory Chancellor's one. He said, that's what the more trade and the more things get better, the money will flow. The centre of interest or strategic interest will go more towards Dublin than London. And Jude, there's no doubt about that. The last thing they know that as well. Jude, if you were anyway smart, you would work out. We should compromise, make Northern Ireland work, have a foot in the EU, have a foot in the UK, tell union or tell nationalists, look, this is working really well. You can have all the benefits of the British system. You can have national health. You can have such and such and such. A wee bit of compromise and reaching out. But hey, I think Leahy to get revert to him again or refer to him again, got it right. Jude, if you can't see your way to winning friends and influencing people as a politician, you're in the wrong game. And the DUP right now are in the wrong game.
That's right. Just very quickly now, because the time's shrinking. This is something that's always puzzled me. How would some unionists say, look, it's all very well for you talking about our British identity being protected. If I'm a unionist and the union is broken between me and Great Britain, how can you say that you're going to cater for my unionism? It's gone.
Yeah.
So what's the answer to that?
I can't answer this, but I can throw this at you. And I've told you a story before. Glenn Barr, who was the UDA commander in the Northwest, anyway, and he was certainly a leading loyalist, came down to see me years ago, and he had this document called, I think it was called Common Sense, dude. I'm not 100% certain. It's a long time ago. And he said, and this is a short version of a long story. He said he had gone, he was calling for UDI, a universal Declaration of Independence for Northern Ireland. And I Glenn, are you serious? In other words, succession from Britain and so on. He says, yeah, he's seceding, sorry. So I said, okay. And I said, what's the big game here? He says, well, it's quite obvious. He says, after Stormont being prorogued and whatever, he says that the Brits don't want us. And I says, why did any nationalists vote for this? He says, well, it's like this. He says, the difference is, he says, we could have a Northern Ireland, independent Northern Ireland. But he says, once we're gone from Britain, we're gone from Britain permanently. But that doesn't rule out a United Ireland sometime down the future. So they were one, and I said to him, by the way, Jude, I definitely asked him. I said, how is this going down with the members and all that? He says, I'm getting quite a good response to it. Now, Jude, maybe things have changed, but I thought at the time, that it was significant that they were willing to sort of seriously consider giving up their British identity because, Jude, Northern Ireland is not as British as eventually, no matter what way you come at it. And
I think that message has got through all right. So, in fact, while they might be protesting their Britishness, really what they're talking about is that they are different from those who are nationalist and Republican. They know themselves; they're not really wanted. I heard I was talking to a guy in the civil service in the south, and his view was that if there was a United Ireland, you'd be able to maintain a unionist identity by allowing them to have visits from the Queen, garden parties up in Stormont, OBEs administered, much of the trappings that they associate with the British way of life, and marches, 12 marches, perhaps that's the kind of thing that would be the tipping point if that kind of thing was preserved.
That's me and you yourself and myself made the exact same point. In the event of a United Ireland, or before even a border pool, everything like that should be set. I know that the infrastructure, the detail should all be set out beforehand.
Absolutely. All the more reason why you should have a citizens' assembly now, not in 5 years'
Exactly.
time, not in 10 years' time. Now. Okay, go to a couple of items that you yourself brought up. The first one of these, Pat, I have to tell you, it took my breath away and I just felt a bit sick. It's about this Shamrock Rovers manager. I never heard of the guy before, but I mean, it's awful. Shamrock Rovers manager Stephen Bradley was taunted by fans of what was he? What, Cork City?
Mark Celtic.
Cork Celtic.
Stephen Bradley's a 9-year-old son, as far as I know, has got leukemia, and he was after the match. I think it was there was 3 or 4 standings off, and there was all the rest. But it was about half an hour after the match. Apparently, there's a pub quite close to the ground of Cork Celtic's ground. I think it's maybe a place called Turner's Cross. But anyway, I heard the manager or the owner of Cork Celtic on this morning, and Judy didn't pull any punches. He was raging, and he basically condemned it. No punches pulled at all. But anyway, bottom line is apparently now it's a limited number of spectators, but it was enough. Apparently, they think it's 3 to 4 at the most. There's an outside part of this pub, and these guys were sitting there, and they started shouting something about his son's leukemia. Bradley reported to the Gardaí, and he reported to the club. The club, Cork Celtics, the guy said they have CCTV. The pub has totally rode in with them, and it provided the CCTV. The club itself has apparently got a camera on some sort of stand that looks into this where this pub is, and they have also been in. So they said without question, there's at least 2 of them going to get life bans and whatever other. Now the Gardaí are also investigating it. Now as far as I'm aware, Jude, there's no such thing as a hate crime statute in the South. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think that's the case. So I don't know where the Gardaí can take it.
Well, if they haven't, they should get one, because there's a lot of hatred in that.
Yeah.
I was trying to think about this and saying, are these people demented or what? But of course, it's the old thing. It's the way they used to shout at black players. What they want to do is to find, and in a way, it's sort of natural. You want to find the chink in the armor of your opposition, the thing that'll really rile them, really get them going, upset them to an extent where they won't be thinking rationally anymore. So if you can land on something like the color of the person's skin, or throw bananas, or whatever it might be, and in this case, your son's dying of leukemia, and we have it with Man United, the opposition supporters making aircraft sounds. You have it with Liverpool.
I remember the famous one. Not enough died in the Munich air. I know that as a song. Dude, that was disgusting. It really was. I actually heard that being sung one day, and I thought that there is totally unacceptable.
But then, of course, you don't get very good example from your politicians. We saw that on that Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland thing, where the guy from, where was it from? The Shankill, who said they didn't shoot enough of them on Bloody Sunday. It was a good shooting Sunday. Yeah. God bless us. Right, we're down to less than a minute. Name a book, Pat, that you're reading, or a book you would recommend, because that was one of the things that our viewers asked for.
I finished the last night. The other night, I Found You. It's not the world's greatest literature. And what's the other one? It's called A Wasted Vigil. Hold on.
Quick.
Hold on. The Wasted Vigil. Can you see it? I started that one the other night. It's by Nadim Aslam. It's a story of it's set in a Muslim sort of society, and the rules and all the rest and so on. It's
recommend it.
It's tough. It's not particularly cheerful.
Okay, I've got one that's not too cheerful, but it's good, by John Banville, and it's called April in Spain.